All right, today we are tackling one of the biggest stories ever told. And what's wild is it's a story without a single written word. We're diving into the epic of prehistory. So, to really wrap our heads around this, let's just start with a number. A really, really big number 99%. That is roughly how much of the human story happened before anyone ever wrote anything down. I mean, think about that. Almost our entire history, our entire journey, it's like a silent movie. Which, of course, begs a huge question, and this is really the central mystery we're investigating today. If almost none of our story was ever written down, how in the world do we know what happened? How do you even begin to piece together a history that has no words? Okay, so to answer that, first we have to really define what we're looking for. This giant, unwritten chapter of our past. Well, we call it prehistory. And it's not that there was no history happening, far from it. It's just a history that was lived, not written, and it was left behind for us to find in totally different ways. And just look at the sheer scale of this. I mean, seriously, our story kicks off around 3.3 million years ago, right? With the first stone tools. But writing? That doesn't show up until about 5,200 years ago. Look at that timeline. Everything you've ever read about, every king, every empire, every single book, it's all crammed into that tiny, tiny little sliver at the very end. Everything else, that's prehistory. So, the official definition, if you want to get technical, is the period between those first stone tools and the invention of writing. But here's the interesting part. It didn't end for everyone at the same time. It's not like a switch was flipped. For some people, prehistory ended thousands of years ago. For others, it was much, much more recent. All right, so if there are no journals to read, no letters, nothing, what clues did our ancestors actually leave behind? You know, if you're an archaeological detective, what's in your toolkit for solving a case that's literally millions of years old? Let's take a look. Okay, clue number one, artifacts. An artifact is basically anything that a human made or even just modified. So we're talking about a stone hand axe, a simple clay pot, or even a tiny carved bone needle. But they're not just things. You gotta think of them as frozen actions. They tell us what people did and even give us a window into how they thought. Then you have clue number two, eco-facts. Now these are different. They're natural things, organic remains, but they have a human story to tell. So think of animal bones left over from a meal, or some burned seeds from a campfire, maybe even ancient pollen that tells you what the climate was like. They basically set the stage. They tell us what our ancestors were eating and what the world around them looked and felt like. And for our final clue, we have fossils. This is the big one. See, if artifacts are the tools and ecofacts are the scenery, then fossils are the actors. These are the preserved remains of the people themselves, the actual bones of our ancestors and the animals that lived right alongside them. They are without a doubt the stars of the show. So, now that we have our detective's toolkit, artifacts, ecofacts, and fossils, let's see what this evidence actually tells us. It's time to open up the case file and meet some of the key players from our very, very deep family history. Okay, so this is kind of a simplified family tree, right? Way back, about 4.2 million years ago, you've got Australopithecus. Then, fast forward to around 2 million years ago, and Homo erectus shows up. And these guys were the first of our relatives to really get out there and explore, spreading across Eurasia. Much, much later, we see the Neanderthals emerge about 430,000 years ago. And then finally, the Cro-Magnons, who were early modern humans, basically us. They show up in Europe around 50,000 years ago. So let's zoom in on those last two groups, because they're fascinating. On one hand, you have the Neanderthals. They were built stockier, more robust, which makes sense. It was an adaptation for surviving in colder climates. Their toolkit, called the Mousterian, was super versatile and let them thrive for a long time. But then you have the Cro-Magnons. They were built a lot more like we are today, and with them, you see this explosion of culture. We're talking beautiful, complex cave art, detailed little figurines, even musical instruments. It's like we're getting a direct glimpse into their minds, into their symbolic world. You know, it's so easy for us to just label prehistoric people as primitive or simple, but the evidence, it tells a totally different story. Their world was buzzing with innovation. I'm talking about huge technological leaps that would change what it meant to be human, forever. And wow, what an explosion of technology it was. I mean, look at this. They didn't just have spears. They engineered better ways to hunt, going from simple stone points to the atlatl, which is a spear thrower, and then eventually to the bow and arrow. They weren't just surviving their environment, they were mastering it, using tiny bone needles to sew warm clothes, building boats to cross open water. And they were making life better too, creating baskets and pottery to store food. But it wasn't just about survival. They were creating art, making figurines, painting these incredible scenes on cave walls. This wasn't primitive. This was a world of genius at work. So, why should we care? Why does this silent, 3 million-year-long story matter to us, right here, right now? Well, the simple answer is because everything we are, everything our entire world is built on, it's all standing on the foundation that they created. Really, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that the entire blueprint for our civilization, it was drafted in prehistory. In that massive stretch of time, we didn't just evolve physically, we evolved culturally. We're talking about mastering fire, creating the very first art and symbols, and laying the groundwork for the agricultural revolution. Learning how to farm, domesticating animals, building the first towns. Absolutely every step we've taken since then, it stands on their shoulders. They started it all. I think this quote from M.C. Burkett really just captures that sense of awe perfectly. It is doubly amazing to observe to what a high degree of proficiency these upper Paleolithic artists had already attained. And he's so right. It isn't just that they made art. It's that the art was so good. It shows they weren't just scraping by to survive. They were observing, creating, and expressing something deeply human. And so that kind of leaves us with one last question to think about, doesn't it? The people of prehistory, they left behind stone tools, bones, and incredible paintings. So millions of years from now, when the archaeologists of the future are digging through our layer of history, what will our artifacts say about us?